Hey, mic check, mic check. So we're...
All right, I'll repeat once again for folks joining virtually. Now that the live stream is going, we'll get started in about a minute. I will take your questions virtually if you text me with your number or your name and publication, and we will alternate between virtual and in person. And we'll get started soon.
You want to know? Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. It's a beautiful fall day. So I wanted to start off a little bit today talking about our, this is a progress update on where we are on serving Oregonians who are experiencing homelessness, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So I think what's important, anytime government or my office puts out numbers and says, here's the progress we're making, I think it's important for people to see that, because it shows what is possible when we set goals, we have plans in place, we make investments to reach those goals. Because there's been a lot of hard work over the last year and a half, and even before then, from state government, local government, community partners to help folks who are experiencing homelessness. I also want to emphasize the numbers that I put out today. This is not a victory lap. This is not a mission accomplished moment. This is a progress point. It's really important for Oregonians to see their government actually making progress on significant issues. And we still have a lot of folks who need help, and we're headed in the right direction. And I think that's the takeaway for today. So since the first day in office for me, and again, beginning of this year with the state of emergency and setting goals with local providers and government to keep people from becoming homeless in the first place, building more shelter capacity, getting people rehoused. We've had some very specific goals in mind, and this is an opportunity to see what those are. So I wanted to share, and there's been a lot of great partnership with the legislature. This, you don't get here alone, because you have to put some money on the table to address these issues as well. So with everything that's been going on in the last year and a half, in this biennium, 2023, 2025, we are on course to do the following. We will be able to maintain 2,400 or more existing shelter and navigation beds, 1,700 or more new shelter beds in Oregon communities have been added and will be sustained through the biennium. So if you think about that, that is 4,100 beds, navigation center beds that are going to be maintained through the biennium because of setting goals and bringing resources to the effort at hand. By the end of the biennium, 2,700 or more households will be rehoused. So it's not just about getting folks into shelter, but helping them on their path to being rehoused. Prevention is the most cost-efficient way to address this crisis. So by the end of the biennium, 24,000 or more households will be prevented from becoming homeless in the first place. We also need to build units. This is, at the end of the day, a housing challenge. We are on track with state resources to produce 2,800 or more affordable housing units across the state. And we have to get more housing online. And because of the infrastructure investments made by the legislature, that's water, sewer, streets, with those infrastructure dollars, we will be seeing 25,000 or more affordable and market rate housing units by the end of the biennium. Actually, the infrastructure will be built, the housing will follow. Some folks will be online by next year. It might take a couple years for others. Those numbers are real numbers. Those are real people's lives. That is how government is coming together from top to bottom to make progress here in Oregon. That takes focus, it takes collaboration and partnership. And I know that we're seeing it across the state. And I think right now I want to make sure I thank everyone, because everyone's working really hard to make these kinds of numbers actually happen for folks. I also want to flag tomorrow at the Housing Stability Council meeting, the agency, the Oregon Housing and Community Services, will be presenting a comprehensive report on the 5-year plan that just wrapped up. In 2019, they issued a 5-year housing plan, 2019 to 2024. They're doing a wrap-up report on that tomorrow at the Stability Council. I'm very familiar with that plan. I read it when I was speaker. We came in and tried to do some work, and then the pandemic happened. But that report, I think, is another indicator of when we set plans, when we say we have goals, we make progress, because they hit almost all their goals in there. The one they didn't quite hit, you'll hear, is homeownership. That's a challenging one. But we need to keep having goals and targets, because we can hit them if we all work together and put the investments in the right place. I think finally, what I'll just say on this, as we go into 2025, the challenge for me and my office is to make sure we can maintain the momentum that we've had, the commitments across the state for homelessness services and housing. I think you've all heard we're going to have a little bit of a hard budget cycle coming up. One-time money is gone. The pandemic is really, any of that money is gone. We as a state need to maintain our commitment for these services, because when we do, we change people's lives. That's going to be hard in this budget. I'm still committed to doing what I can to keep these numbers going forward. But at the end of the day, I want people to know when you set those targets and you invest, you actually can make progress. And with that, if you have questions about that, we can get you more details, but also happy to take other questions. So. My staff interacts with the agency on a regular basis. Director Bell is, I think, doing a very solid job. She is, I see her, I know she's out going to openings as well. So she's pretty busy. So is there a specific question about the director? Because it's my press conference. So, yeah.
I have a remote question. All right, from Jeremiah Truitt. After the Supreme Court overturned a lower court ruling in Grants Pass versus Johnson, cities across the West are moving to criminalize homelessness. Oregon theoretically protects homeless residents under its objectively reasonable standard, but some cities here are begging for more permission to punish homeless residents, using grants passed as a blueprint. Today, Disability Rights Oregon sent a letter to grants passed city attorneys, outlining how its ordinances may violate multiple anti-discrimination laws, including the ADA Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Fair Housing Act. How is your office working with local jurisdictions, the Oregon DOJ, or other specific agencies to uphold the civil rights of homeless constituents under current state law?
Jeremiah, thanks for the question. So I've not seen the letter from Disability Rights, or I'm not up to speed on some of the issues down in Grants Pass right now, but we can talk on specifics. Here's what I will say. We have cities who are following the law here in Oregon, are doing everything they can to maintain objective standards of where folks can be, and also trying to meet the needs of folks who need to be in different places when they're sleeping outside. So in terms of legal protections, I think the law is very clear there, and it is up, obviously there's lawyers involved here in Grants Pass, but I don't think I can say much more than that. I think it's important to follow the law. There's a law in place that says you have to have reasonable objective standards in your community to serve folks who are outside. And my expectation is people follow the law.
Blair, going off of that, I know Portland Mayor said has called on the state to keep that state law. He's kind of saying they are limited in their efforts. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on changing the state law to the future?
Well, I think Portland has a new ordinance in place, and I think they're working to make that work. If people want to come to the legislature and have conversations about changing the law, I will certainly review those. I think people need to say what they want to change before I can have any kind of reaction to it.
You got a lot of modeling today about what we're going to accomplish. What does it tell you about how we move the needle in point in time over whether or not we're going to
I don't know the answer to that question. The point in time count, we don't want to get too into the weeds here. It is a data point that we use to figure out how we're doing. I would like to see us doing better the next time that count happens. I think we're doing what we need to on getting more shelter space. But we're going to take it as it comes. We are not out of the woods. We still have a lot of work to do here. We have too many Oregonians who live outside. And when we get that new count, we're going to take that data and decide what we do next, but we won't have it for quite a while. So.
Some of the case managers in the metro area are telling me that their caseloads are nearly double the national standard. They're spending upwards of 12, 13, 14 hours a day doing paperwork. And maybe if you're lucky, they'll get an hour a day to spend with real people, so 25, 30 of their clients that they're trying to squeeze into that short time. I was curious if you were aware of that crushing caseload, and if there's anything that your team can do to address that problem.
Well, I would certainly want to hear directly from communities about what they need to be different, and not knowing totally the situation. But if we're talking about case management for folks who are experiencing serious mental illness and are also experiencing homelessness at the same time, we do need to make it simpler for those folks to work with individuals, those face-to-face conversations, those ongoing relationships with people. It's what is going to help them get better and more stable. I do think under the Medicaid program, where a lot of our funding comes from, there is a lot of paperwork. So there have been conversations at OHA with community mental health providers, like, can we simplify this? And we are certainly working on our new waiver, the new homeless assistance that comes through Medicaid, trying to simplify that as well. The goal is to make this as simple as possible to get people the help they need. But if you have any specifics on which type of case management, I'd love to hear that. So. So if you recall, when I had the homelessness state of emergency last year, Lane County was one of the continuums, one of the groups that were very prepared on day one to get started. So I think they just had a better infrastructure in place, much stronger partnerships, probably good relationships with their landlords, because rehousing also takes, knowing where you can place people for housing. So I praise Lane County for the work they're doing. I think they've been very strategic about how they're working together to solve problems there. But we can look into it more. But the rehousing piece is challenging. I think that's a hard part for Portland. Having those relationships with landlords, finding available housing places. So we got to see what Lane County is doing and see if other places can model that as well. So I'm glad they're doing as well as they are.
And then talking about that dashboard, it showed at least the need on at least rental assistance or coming home in the first place, 20%, a little bit lower maybe than you would. So any kind of idea of what it will take to kind of make sure you
I believe in being really transparent. I think our largest challenge right now is on the eviction prevention. Our dollars are going quickly. Rents are up. We have a lot of people who are still very unstable. I think you saw the article about folks who are in subsidized housing, also having trouble paying their rent. I think it's the biggest challenge right now. So we need to maintain the resources as rents go up. That is going to be challenging. And I think it's going to be a big challenge for the upcoming budget as well. I think one of the things I would say for the community providers who are on the ground, keep up the good work. I know it's hard, but connecting with people and keeping folks stable is really is much more effective in the long run. I don't have any specific answer there. I think there's a little bit of lag on the data as well, so we can look into that, because I think there is a little bit of lag on the data on the emergency order, because I think it's only through June. Yeah.
Governor, one of the things you talked about before is transportation and homelessness and housing have a relationship in many ways, one affecting the other. What is your role in helping the transportation discussions that are going on come to some bipartisan agreement that can pass the legislature? And in a related way, are you looking at other things that have an impact on transportation that also could affect housing, such as SDCs, more land use changes, whatever it may be?
Well, we are coming into session with the next iteration of the housing production framework, and there's a lot of things we want to do on streamlining, so we could go more into detail on that. And that was a very creative pivot from housing to transportation. So here's what I would say. In the housing development side, we can be doing more in the state and accessing federal dollars for transportation-oriented development, particularly in areas that have, very robust transit districts. So in the metro area, we could be doing more in TOD, which is transportation-oriented development. So I'll just put that aside. When it comes to the transportation package, one of the things that's important to me is to maintain what happened in 2017, which was statewide support for transit districts. As we, from a climate perspective, help folks have more options besides just driving their own car. We need safe and stable transit districts. So that's an important piece of the upcoming transportation package. At the end of the day, I'm working with the Speaker and the Senate President on making sure that the transportation package will first deal with the issues in ODOT. We need to have a functioning agency. We are headed towards a path of a significant budget cut if we don't solve that problem. We have to maintain our highways and our roads and all of our basic infrastructure for everybody. And so that is the number one goal for me. We don't need fancy new. We need to maintain what we have. And that means funding the Department of Transportation in the next transportation package.
Lillian from the Oregonian. Her question is, do you have a position on the practice of handing out tents and tarps to people experiencing homelessness by or why not?
Well, these are local decisions. I also believe we shouldn't let people die. And if giving them a tent when the weather is bad will keep them alive while we help get them into shelter and permanent housing, then I think that is a local choice, and that's something we might have to do.
Yeah, legislative dollars set aside in the last session for rental systems were the and they're lower than the requested.
I am working hard to make sure we maintain the state's commitment on rent assistance. We're also looking at continue to move forward on a long-term rent assistance program, so it's not just episodic rent assistance. I'll also be honest, that's a challenging budget conversation, but I'm hoping in my budget to be as large a number as we can on rental assistance, because it is the most cost-effective way to address homelessness, keep people from becoming unhoused in the first place. But yeah. Well, the economy is strong and caseloads are up. There's a lot of need out there. I think you're seeing this as a national situation as well, where we're seeing more folks who have needs that are being met through publicly funded programs, more folks on the Oregon Health Plan. It was great that we have maintained, we're now at 97% insured in our state. A good chunk of that is the Oregon Health Plan. Those are resources that we have to commit to maintain people in healthcare. I've made commitments for our state school fund budget with the reassessment of the current service level budget. That's another $500 million to add to the budget that we hadn't anticipated. So for me, it's making sure we stay focused on the priorities, funding our schools, funding housing and homelessness services, and our behavioral health crisis. Doing all those, it will be challenging given our revenues situation.
From Claire Rush with AP. The data dashboard published today shows that some counties, such as Clackamas and Malheur County, not rehouse a single person between January and June. Is your office working with counties to make sure they're meeting their goals? And if so, how?
Yes, we are reassessing on a regular basis with all of our communities to hit their goals. They have goals for the end of the biennium, and we're going to do everything to do to help them and make sure they understand they need to hit those goals. I support keeping people alive. Sometimes that's what people need. The ultimate goal is not the tent and tarp. That is a mechanism to get folks. You build a relationship like, are you safe and secure today? Great, let's get you into a shelter. Are you in a shelter? Are you ready for stability? Let's get you into housing. This is a continuum conversation. I think where we go wrong if we only think it is about the tent and tarp, that is the beginning part of getting folks into stability. And that is really a local decision, depending on what. I would rather have folks have the outreach to get folks in the shelter.
I think this is the first time we're hearing about these goals. I didn't realize there were goals. First time these numbers. How did we arrive at these specific numbers? I noticed that the rehousing piece is a lot lower than what like the keeping people housed is higher. But I don't know, they're very specific numbers, like 11,000. How did you all arrive at these, and when did you arrive?
Well, I think we've been consistent. I've been consistent on our goals. Some of them were specifically related to the emergency orders. This is a broader conversation of, there were some dollars that came along with the emergency orders. Legislature had different funding streams. I think what's really hard right now is putting all those funding streams in one spot. This is an attempt to say, of all the dollars and all the efforts that are going on, these are the types of numbers we will see by the end of the biennium. Rehousing, more development, shelter beds, as a near-term, short-term solution, as well as keeping people from, becoming evicted and things like that. None of those have changed. I think this is our attempt to say, there's a lot going on. These are the broader goals. We're on track to hit these goals by the end of the biennium because we have stayed focused.
Yeah, we're talking about the yearly goals, like a couple things.
Yeah. I think that's a really, first of all, I appreciate the question because we have agencies managing multiple funding streams, and they want to be accountable and transparent about the different streams. And some of them have different goals. We're trying to put them all in one spot. The goal is to have by the end of biennium a very transparent, clear, objection or outcome-based system. And this is the next kind of iteration of that. But we can get, if you have any feedback on what you're seeing on the websites, we're working on it. Every day we're like, how can we tell this story so people understand what's happening?
Well, it's we have 1,650 households or more last year, and it's 650. 80% of that is far less than.
We had specific goals for last year's order, which we exceeded. And this is us saying, okay, what is that next goal on top of that? Remember, this is an additive. So I don't know if that helps, but we've had different like moments, but we'll try to be a little bit more clear about the different numbers. Yeah.
Governor, Oregon has long had homelessness plans. Governor Gronkowski had a 2-year plan in homelessness, which apparently did not lead us through. What is different now compared to the past? And why? I just got back from DC and Virginia, where I saw hardly any evidence of homelessness. Why is Oregon still having this issue? And what is different about solving it this time?
Well, I do think one of the unique situations about Oregon is the disconnect between folks who need affordable housing and the availability of affordable housing. We cannot underestimate the challenge of not having enough housing that is affordable for folks. I think in other parts of the country, that disconnect is a lot less severe. So I think that is a big issue for Oregon. In terms of the previous plans, I'm smiling because I've been involved in a lot of, I've watched them over the years. Everyone has plans. I don't think it's not sufficient to have a plan with high lofty goals unless you say how you're going to do it. At the end of the day, it's not gonna give you what you need. What I think is different is I've been very clear with our agencies. Yeah, we can talk about rehousing or creating new, shelter beds. How many? How are we going to do that? How are we going to maintain that? We need to know numbers. And I think some plans are just not very good about that. They don't set goals. And we have to do this differently. And that's what this conversation is about.
Can you address both the data that was released today by these are still quality times, COVID, or where they were pre-COVID, and also do you know why ODE wanted to hide that data?
Okay, let me go with the first part. I don't think anyone's trying to hide the data. What I have been asking the agencies to do, and Department of Education is the topic, but this goes true for all of our agencies. When you have data to share, can someone understand what you're telling them? Just handing out a big spreadsheet of like, here are the numbers. Like, well, what do they mean, right? So I don't think anybody at the agency was trying to hide anything. I was just asking them to say like, hey, can you explain this better? So going forward, my expectation for agencies is don't just put out numbers, actually tell us what they mean. Here's what I can tell you what they mean to me. Our numbers are not where they need to be. The fact that our reading and writing numbers are so low, and in some cases, worse than pre-pandemic, unacceptable. That is why I have been focused on things that I think will make a difference. Early literacy investments, we started those. We're going to keep pushing on that. We need more of that in the next biennium. Summer and after school is one of those things we need to get serious about here. When we have learning loss or when we have opportunities at the end of the school day to help students stay on track, we need to be doing that. We're not doing enough here in Oregon. And then lastly, making sure our schools have the basic funding that they need to provide the services, but that has to be coupled with accountability. So you're going to see a higher number on the state school fund in my budget. We will be also talking about greater accountability, aligned with what we're trying to achieve, improving attendance, improving graduation rates, improving reading and writing and math scores. We have to connect the money to the outcomes we want. I'm not satisfied. I've been really clear with our school partners. This has to get better. And the assessment data that we have is just, it's another blip of here's where we are. We've got to be better.
Where do you stand on transitional
How would you define transitional housing?
How would you find transitional housing is more communal living, where you have case managers who are living there 24/7 and helping people who are chronically homeless get that first step of being, inside again. But they have, they're going to have space to have people. There's not the isolation. That's kind of the way I.
That's super helpful. I'm a strong supporter of that. I think my work with Project Turnkey and the conversion of motels over time, because if you think about this, back to you're on a street in a tent, someone connects with you and says, you can be more stable in a pod village, a safe rest village, for example, in Portland. Are you ready after a couple months to move on to maybe a turnkey site, a motel site where you have a room and there are services on site, there are resources for getting fed on site, and then into housing? Folks who have been traumatized by chronically living on the streets need a pathway to stability. I think on the other piece, some folks are going to always need a little bit of help. So permanent supportive housing is really important. In fact, right now the agency is trying to set some standards across the board on what we mean by permanent supportive housing. What is the right level of support? For some folks, they just need someone on site for an occasional question. Other folks are going to need help with getting fed, maybe getting help with their medications. That's a different type of permanent supportive housing. So we're trying to figure that out. Our continuum has to fit multiple needs, and we have some gaps right now, but I think permanent supportive housing is an important part of the continuum.
One more question.
And we can set up some one-on-one time. So
I guess I would say DMV learned in early August that
yeah.
It didn't tell you for the state election officials 6 weeks. Is that appropriate in your mind, or do you think they need?
Ideally, I would like less surprises, and so having information earlier is always better. My understanding of the chain of events there is when they were given some understanding that there could be some challenges that they needed to look at the system, they did so. It's not like they sat on the inquiry that they had about the voter registration system. The things that I've asked the agency to put in place, we'll have an after action report here on what has happened to this point on Monday. There's ongoing training happening with staff. There's going to be a long-term, as you saw in my press release, data analysis due at the end of how we could be doing things different, and that might turn up other ways we can improve the system. And really, the Secretary of State and the DMV have to have some kind of calendar of, these are the things we need to check on a regular basis. Am I a little surprised we didn't have these checks in place, these checks and balances? And we're changing that because we need to have a system we can know is secure and the data is accurate. So yeah, I don't like being like surprised after the fact, but it's not like they weren't doing anything; they just didn't tell us.
So did you communicate that to them, that maybe they should, or the person?
Well, I'm also realistic enough that not everything revolves around my office all the time. That being said, I think I'm really clear with agency directors. If you've got a problem, please tell us. Please tell my office as soon as you know. We're here to help you. Mistakes will happen in state government. It's how you react to them that's important. How you get on them, how you solve the problem, how you fix them. And the DMV is fixing, and we are asking them to do things to make sure these fixes are in place.
You want to talk about the UGB and why you made the decision?
So thank you for the coverage on the urban growth boundary expansion under Senate Bill 4 for the semiconductor expansion. The public hearing's on October 10th. We are following the law passed by the legislature to provide additional land for growth of the industry. The approach I've taken, I think, is in alignment with the law and the intention of the law. I think it provides the land that Washington County and the Hillsborough area could take advantage of to grow the industry in the long term. And I think it answers the question, will we have some land available to get one of the NSTC sites in Oregon? I think it meets that kind of sweet spot. There are going to be people who said you shouldn't have done any. There are people who say you should have done more. I did what I did because I wanted to do it appropriately, with moderation, but with intent, and I think that's what you see in the land. So, but we can set up some more time for other conversations when you need to have them. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.